Lakeshore Drive, riding down 79. It's Friday night, all the girls are looking right. Welcome back to Access Lakeshore Drive with Emmy winner Chuck Armstrong.
It just goes to show you they'll give trophies to anybody. But one be on the show, I'm honored. Good to talk to you.
Well, you know, I remembered when we were on Movie Reviews and More, which is how we met.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered looking at all of those Emmys, and I said to myself, how did he get all of those Emmys, and what is his story? You know, we have a lot of younger listeners, much younger than myself, who sometimes need a little inspiration, don't know where they're going. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got started with your journey and overall how you became the CEO and executive producer of Wonderama?
Sure. So, you know, somebody said this to me actually today on a phone call. You know, people that really change the world are usually way over their skis, which is, you know, and he referred to people like Ted Turner and Bill Gates, but, you know, they kind of manifested it because they believed in it so much. And, you know, one of the things that we try to do with Wonderama and what I've hopefully tried to do with my career is, you know, if it's to be, it's really up to you. You know, you have to say, look, why not me? You know, I refer back to the 2004 Red Sox, which was their thing. I say, hey, we might be horrible, but why not us, right? Or the Cubs, more importantly, from Lakeshore Drive.
Hey! They've gone on to do great things, just like you said.
I know, it just comes down to, you know, really mindset is key, and how I spent many years in radio, and when I left, part of my leaving was I was to stay out for a period of time, part of my contract, and I got into television because somebody told me I couldn't, and it's a, you know, a bad probably a way to be, but you know, you're defined by what people tell you no to and you do anyway, right? So if you don't do, like I said, if you don't believe in your ability to do it, why should anybody else? And that doesn't mean you need to have hubris. It just means, you know, I think President Biden said it. His mother used to tell him, hey, nobody's better than you, and you're not better than anybody else, but you're not worse. So
that's really true.
And it's really true because if you look at most people, they're taking the advice of others, which others usually don't take themselves. So I just really, you know, how I got into Wonderama was I was creating television programming up in Boston and all of New England. And, you know, at some point we're all going to be dead. So why not create content that was good and hopefully inspirational to kids, that was still hip, but really had an overriding message of, hey, you know, this is what you can do. You can do anything you want to. You just got to put in the work and know that it's available to you. And so when we wrote I wrote the theme song, it was, you know, what is Wonderama? You know, if you're sitting around with nothing cool left to do, looking for a show that's really all about you, there's a place you can go. It's a thing you can be. It's a world full of possibilities, Wonderama. And so that's really been the philosophy, which is, hey, let's show kids doing stuff that other kids can say, hey, I can do that too. And it's really worked. We're education informational as a show, which means that each week, and we're certified by Stanford and a Metropolitan College in New York here in Manhattan and the Bronx. But what it says is that each time Wonderama goes on, it's entertaining, but kids will get a lesson plan. And so we call it spinach au gratin because you can't really tell you're learning something. And that's what really retains stuff when you're not being instructed, when you're being inspired. And then from that content, we've developed 55 lesson plans for the city of New York, which they mostly for middle school. And now we're actually working with the Census Bureau for the new economic data census is coming up, to come up with really cool financial literacy lesson plans for kids. So if they want to be a banker, or if they want to be, you know, a lemonade stand owner, that they can go in and use that information that the census folks collect, they do 180 surveys about the descending one, but having the access to that information is so key. And what you find is if somebody has access to something, they have equal access to something, they will surprise you by how amazing they will be. And the difference between someone that's had a great life in business and someone that hasn't, 99 times out of 10 is because somebody had a door open for them. So
couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
So the whole thing about Wonderama is how do we create a way for kids to kind of just open doors, but open their minds to the possibilities that they can be whatever they want. They're not limited by their social or economic stature, that everything that they want to do is available to them. It just might be a different path. And so that's kind of where we come from as a philosophy in the program. And it kind of shows up in who watches us, because people say, hey, I can identify with that because you're talking to me.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, that definitely sounds like, the thoughts of a visionary. So was this something that you started thinking about like in high school, maybe perhaps? Could you tell us a little bit about your high school upbringing?
Yeah. So my name's Chuck Armstrong. My parents live in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Wow.
Yeah. And my dad's since passed, but basically, I went to Rockland. Actually, I went to Holy Family, and then, which was in Rockland, Massachusetts, and then to Cardinal Spellman in Brockton, Massachusetts. And the one thing that I found was, at least for me, that my mom was still the greatest influence, because I'm number 7 of 8 kids. So if you think I'm looking for attention, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Holy cow.
But my mom always said, hey, you can do whatever you want to do, as long as you maintain your own morals and guidelines. She goes, the world is your oyster, so to speak. And that's, a lot of kids don't get that. And so I was lucky in that wherever I went to school, they didn't drum that out of me. Right. And then I graduated from Brandeis, and I was at the time, there wasn't a lot of people that were Catholic, French, Canadian, Irish, Scottish in the school. First time that I'd ever felt, hey, this is what it's like to be the other. Not because people didn't like who I was, but because I wasn't, part of the norm. At that point, it was about 81% Jewish. And, I was student body vice president a couple of years, but it was a great lesson in what it's like to not be accepted for what you are for no reason other than what you look like or what your religion is. And again, I'm not saying that people were mean, and I'm not saying that people said, oh, I don't like him because he's X, Y, and Z, but you could feel it. And it's it's something that I'm chairman of a college in Manhattan and in Bronx. It's called Metropolitan College of New York, which started as a welfare to career school back in the 60s because of the social movement of the 60s. And it was started by a woman named Audrey Cohen, and they called it the Seven Sisters. This was really a college about how do you create positive social change through the education. And they teach differently. It's a pedagogy of a purpose-centered education. And all the dimensions are about how do you create constructive action where you live and where you work. And what I found is that it's been easy for me. The college is largely a minority population, as considered by the U.S. government, not by the people that are in it. And basically, it was easy for me to understand what it's like to try to be competing in an environment where it isn't always a level playing field, but the people that are in control of the field don't understand that it's not a level playing field. And so I come at this a little bit differently from a programming standpoint, because it's not what people are obviously thinking. It's what has become acculturated through norms that they didn't know were wrong. So if you go back 60 years or 40 years and look at the way that they created media content back then and try to translate it today, a lot of it doesn't fly, right?
Yeah,
And,
unfortunately.
and it's not because somebody was, again, I made the joke at the beginning about it's better to be an unconscious competent. It's because they were unconscious and incompetent in certain ways. So what we try to
Yeah.
when you look at everything, I mean, David Osmond, our host, has got, he's got MS to the point where he was in a wheelchair at 26. He knows what it's like to be able to not walk. He's now able to. Coco and Breezy, who are co-hosts, they're from Minneapolis. They started an eyewear company at 19 because they were bullied in school. What happened was they found that if they didn't make eye contact with people, that they wouldn't get into the problems. And they started to bedazzle their eyewear to the point where they made these sunglasses. They called them their chakra glasses. And Prince saw them and liked them so much, he bought them. So they said, hey, you know what? We're going to start our own company. And so, again, out of their pain became something really good. Now they're some of the top really social, I would say, fashion people in the country. So I didn't mean to wax on too much about that, but
No.
it's really important that when we create content, that not only is it accessible to all, but that we realize that people just need to have the inspiration and the tools to get stuff done, and we hope that we play a small part to allowing those two things to happen by giving educational content to schools free of charge, and to offer a program that hopefully inspires them.
Yeah. And I mean, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And definitely you were not rambling. I mean, that's how you ended up with 7 Emmy Awards. So, so, I mean, television programming is a very difficult thing, and you've found your niche. Now, I may probably be the last generation to actually experience Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but with that show actually going off the air, do you feel that there has been like a continued void in the the children's television programming space?
Well, it's funny because people don't realize Fred Rogers was, and his wife, who was very important to that whole process, they were a machine that came out of Pittsburgh. It wasn't public television that created Fred Rogers. Fred Rogers actually created children's programming on public TV. Prior to that, it was, Sesame Street was after Fred. I'm kind of a little old for Sesame Street. It first started when I was a kid, but it was younger than my age group. And what he did was he said, look, I want, my mom, we weren't allowed to watch much TV, but we could watch Fred Rogers. And what he was kind of a voice of reason. And he took that voice very seriously to be inclusive, and so you don't, it's not PBS. It's, do individuals have the ability to, because great art will out, but that art needs a venue. And so it's become more and more difficult for individuals. I mean, the next Fred Rogers is out there. There could be better than Fred. But at a TV show? Probably not. Because PBS has, become a big business, as has, all the TV stations have pretty much agglomerated. And it just makes it more difficult because when you're serving, especially in the television business, when you're serving a public market, double-digit cash flow growth becomes the most important thing. So we were allowed to do what we wanted to do with Wonderama because we're independent. Now, that has its positives and its negatives. The negatives are you don't get the, we started out in 2 markets. We're now in 115, 6 years hence. But the reality is you have the ability to make mistakes. And the big problem is, it's the same thing with the music industry. If your first single doesn't sell, do you get a second one? You know, and the same thing with TV. If it doesn't show up in the overnights the first week, do you get the second week? And, you know, some of the biggest hits in television are the ones that got knocked off traditional TV and ended up at cable, right? All of a sudden, you know, Cagney and Lacey was the first one that were, they went like huge on cable. So that's the thing. I believe that the reason that Fred Rogers' replacement, yeah, some things have changed, but you know, kids for the most part are looking for that voice where it's available for them. And you know, with the advent of the internet and kids losing, or parents losing control of whom can talk to their kids, it just gets more difficult and more difficult to find it there. And on traditional TV, you know, you don't see the independent programming that you once did. I mean, Wonderama was right. Bozo the Clown, independent.
Oh my gosh, you just took that right out of my mouth. I was just going to say Bozo the Clown. That's what I grew up on. Yes.
Really, Bozo was the first syndicated program for kids that would be literally, it was like
I loved him.
Yeah, what was the show that with Miss Jean, Romper Room. So
Romper Room
came out of Baltimore. Bozo came out of Chicago. You know, and then of course Clarabelle the Clown became Captain Kangaroo. But
Captain Kangaroo.
But
yeah.
they created local programming with a person that was Bozo for the market. So in Boston, it was a guy named Frank Avrush. I don't know who the Bozo was in Chicago, but you know, the king of all of them. And that just does, you know, the opportunities aren't there anymore. And so Fred Rogers was just like the Bozo the Clown was for Pittsburgh, but he was a little different. He was I think it was
Bob Bell, maybe?
Right. And he was on, you know, the PBS station, but the reality was he was given a chance to kind of create his thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it was able to grow. So
boy did it.
You know, we have this is Chuck Armstrong, and you're listening to Access Lakeshore Drive. Turn up the volume. From the Middle East. So we originally talked to people from Egypt. Now we're talking to people from the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, because they're looking for kids programming, you know, that is westernized to a point,
but it's safe for the kids to watch.
Yeah, for the kids to watch. And they've looked at our show and they said, you know what, you know, the content works here because it's just kids being kids, and you know, we're not doing anything untoward. I mean, there certainly is probably not going to make all the standards that they have over there, but the reality is it's family friendly, but it's still fairly hip.
Right.
And, you know, and now the next step for us is, you know, how do we create, you know, David speaks fluent Spanish.
Does it really? That's great.
Yeah. He did his mission in Spain. Yes. In Madrid. So he speaks like really good Spanish, you know, it's like, so, but it all comes down to, you know, creating something that kids can kind of own. So it's really got to have a host from that area. We've been talking to a guy named Moula, who's from France, who's a magician, and that works. You know, magicians are still cool in France. And so it really comes down to creating the right thing for that environment. And so open to partners, but you know, you got to have, it takes a lot of dry powder, as they say, to open up in more than one market. And we're just, you know, growing as we grow through our own success, as opposed to having a giant checkbook.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, that actually brings me to my next question. So when creating projects for different markets, is that similar to what it would be, you know, on our end of the spectrum in the music business, where you would format an album to fit, say, Germany's taste?
You know, I always thought that I went through a thing called Leadership Music in Nashville. I was honored to be a part. I was the only radio/internet guy invited. And, you know, so of course I was already hated when I walked in because I was from the radio business. But you've ruined the music industry. And so in many ways they're right. But But the issue is, once you try to get an artist to, create something specifically for an audience, I think the creativity gets kind of leaked out.
Mm-hmm.
So, you need to obviously be culturally relevant. So if you're talking to Germans, you should be singing in German. But the one thing, especially stuff that you've created,
thank you.
It crosses all cultural lines, right? You want to see you want to know where people know more about jazz or R&B or anything that, is a true American export. Whether
I don't know what I make anymore. It's a hodgepodge.
Whatever. They know more about it overseas because they like the Western product. So the whole point is just create something that works for you, and it should work for them. When it's the individual song or work, and if it's a TV show, then that's just the glue to promote what that local work is all about. So in my opinion, you do need a local spokesperson, but I think art can translate culture. Not just 99 Luft Balloons. It could be anything.
I love that song so much. Oh, I love it. I love it. We're gonna have to have them come on the show, and I'm gonna say it's all because of Chuck. All because of Chuck.
That's right. Bring on me. Anyway, but main thing right now, we're doing something with Jazz at Lincoln Center, and they've picked Witten's picked the top 15 finalists for this essentially Ellington contest, and for the
that's awesome.
Yeah, we're featuring one band each week, and then on the last week we're going to actually feature all 15 bands in a show. And you wouldn't believe the amount of web traffic that we get from Europe.
Wow, I'm not surprised.
It's like, it's just, they are looking at the great new young talent, and it's more important in many ways overseas than it is here. Not because smooth jazz changed the way people perceive jazz. It's just, it really works. It translates.
I love Kenny G, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a guilty pleasure. I'm sorry, guys. I had to throw that out there.
No, but you know what? He's an unbelievable musician, right? I think he should just cut his hair at some point. But he is possibly one of the best musicians you'll ever meet. And a nice, I only met him for 2 seconds once at Sony, but he was just super, super nice. So you can't wish anything but wonderful things. But the issue is, if you talk to a real jazz player about, basically popular music jazz, which is what smooth jazz is, it's a different genre. It's the difference between, rock and top 40. They might have some similar instruments, but it's a different approach. But anyway, I digress. It's, again, to your original question, if you are reflecting the popular culture of another country on your show, but it speak to the language of those people, it can work. But it's always been my feeling that if you try to put a round peg in a square hole, it doesn't work out.
You're right about that. I've definitely learned that. I've had my fair share. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you need to sound more like this. Like, yeah, you don't know, games become such a hit because there was nothing like it. Now, if you had asked somebody 2 years ago, would a show from Korea about people playing a kids game where they all get killed, and it's in Korean, would it work in the United States? Say no, it won't work. So you can't pick the next hit because it's got to, people have an amazing sense of malarkey meter. I don't say the BS meter because that would, I'm a kid.
That's a great word.
But it's they go and say, oh yeah, this is real or this isn't. And Squid Games was real, right?
I love Squid Games. That's a guilty pleasure too. Sorry guys, I had to throw that out there.
And they're winning all these awards, and people are like, they don't even speak English. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter. They got the emotional feelings across, and that's kind of what's cool. But what's the question?
Okay. So my favorite thing about Wonderama, honestly, to be completely honest, and it might almost be sacrilegious to mention their name in this interview because it is about Wonderama, but Wonderama, this iteration with Daddy Osmond really reminds me of what it was like growing up in the 90s having Nickelodeon. That's what Wonderama reminds me of now. It's hip, it's fresh, it's happening. No one else is
Well,
doing.
they did. David and Coco and Breezy are doing live action, and so the reason it reminds you of live action is because it's live action. And if you
It's
look,
the real deal.
there's nothing. They tried to reboot Total Request Live. They reboot another show called Double Dare, which I could go on for a long time on.
I know Double Dare. I remember that segment from, it was a show.
And so, but the reality was, it was, and I don't know how Total Request Live's doing, but it was all about really not creating something new. The nice thing about Wonderama, it had been gone so long that people still had that wonderful feeling about the show, but there wasn't any, like, you didn't have to harken back to all the right. It's like when we launched KTU. I worked for a guy from Chicago named Jimmy DeCastro, who was truly a radio visionary, and a guy named Scott Ginsberg who allowed him to be that visionary. And he came to New York and put on basically a disco station called KTU, and the station went as country. It was worst in the market to first in one rating book. And when all said don't do it, he said, no, New York's a dance town, and we need to really, and he brought in RuPaul. You mentioned drag races, RuPaul of the morning show. And the thing was just, it was amazing to watch. And it was all because, people allowed him the creativity to do it. So the biggest issue is that, when people get into corporate situations, their job is dependent upon them not getting blamed for a mistake. And creativity is nothing but a glorious mistake. And if you don't have time to make it, you're never, our first season was hour-long shows. We moved to a half hour. Why? It made better content. If I was under the arms of a different company, they probably wouldn't have given us that time to figure that out. So those are the, it's again, it goes back to, if you want to be something and want to do something, if you've got the fortitude, you can do it yourself. It's just the tough part is, how long will it take you to get above the fray? And, there's never been an overnight success. It's always been 20 or 30 years, but people only recognize you for oh, you've been around for 2 months, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So my next question, Chuck, probably a very popular one. I'm sure a lot of parents and a lot of kids ask you this a lot, or ask David this a lot. When is the Wonderama merchandise coming?
It's funny because, we're going to start with games, and we've picked a charity that we'd like to partner with on it. We've been very tight with the folks from UNICEF USA. They haven't agreed to this because we haven't asked them yet. But I don't want to sell anything unless somebody gets something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the merch itself, to me, really needs to be around stuff that's utilitarian and hopefully serves a purpose for people.
Yeah.
And, to me, doing a t-shirt, I mean, it's fine. But the reality is, you don't see a lot of people wearing American Idol stuff. And American Idol was possibly the biggest TV show of all time when it was, 06 to 2011 or whatever. It was doing, boxcar ratings, but nobody went out and bought an American Idol sateen jacket. Right?
Well, I certainly didn't buy the cast albums either.
Right.
And
Well,
I hate to say that. I love you guys, but
so the bottom line is, we're trying to figure out right now what we can do. It's going to be merch with a cause, and that doesn't mean it's going to be superly expensive. But what I'd like to do is just tie it back to how can we help. I mean, our greatest gift in the United States is teachers, right? They don't get any kind of accolades. What we found is some of our best research, our best when we're doing educational pieces, teachers have all the answers because they're so close to the kids, and we can kind of help inspire them, because they'll say, hey, what's coming down the pike, they'll know. But the fact that they can tell somebody besides a parent is kind of fun for them. So we haven't really jumped into that yet because we want to do it in a big way. But we do have a game coming called Snake in the Can, which was in the original show. And it's basically one of the staple games that came out where they'd put 8 cans down and they all had snakes except one had flowers. And the kids got to pick the prize. If they answer the question, they got the snake, they got that prize. But if they answered the question and got the flowers, they got all the rest of the prizes. So it was a very popular game. And so we're in the process right now of launching that. And I know that's probably boring, but you asked anyway.
I did, but I mean, Wonderama is just such a, it's such a classic and iconic, brand. I hate to use that word.
Say that one because somebody, the line went dead for 2 seconds. You said Wonderama is such a, and then
I said Wonderama is such a classic, if not almost generational household brand. Do you see yourself going into cartoons? I would love to see a network, honestly.
We actually have. There's a friend of mine out of New Jersey who is super talented named Sharad. And Sharad has a cartoon that we debuted for him in Indonesia called Skunk and Monk. And so Skunk and Monk are 2 really cool, one's a skunk and one's a monkey. But they're kind of 2 cool kids that are going to be doing a bunch of financial lesson plans for us. And we
great
that in the US in the fall. And his name's Sharad Morris. He is one of the best animators. And he's also, we got a couple of versions of the Wonderama. And that's kind of a joke because, in New York, you have all the boroughs. Why not have a llama?
Oh, yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Hey, why are you bringing in donkeys? Come on. But main thing is, this is a brand that we're almost like, the Tracy Ullman show. Sharad created this brand. He's got years of experience. He was a hip-hop.
You guys are the new Nickelodeon. I mean, I'm just going to say it. You guys are the new Nickelodeon. And I don't want to get no slime tossed on me, but I'm just going to say it.
Yeah, I from your mouth to God's ears, I would not say they have the hubris to say that. But the whole point is we hope to create verticals for sticky and informative content that mom and dad can say, you know what, that's cool. And some of the other major companies, over the last couple of weeks have had some issues with that because when you try to be all things to all people, it gets very difficult. It doesn't mean that you've lost your focus. It just means that your business in and of itself has multiple focuses. And so, you can't really be all things to all people and then have everybody be happy, and you become a punching bag. So, we're very cognizant of the fact that what we'll try to do is, again, try to super serve the people that like us, try to speak to them in a voice that's not just educational, but, relates to them in a positive, hip way if we can help it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's hard for me not to say that because, we've been talking so much about, how much the content has changed and the voids that there are, and, what really is missing, in, the children's programming space is that classic, interactive, television. A lot of our kids, what do they do? They're in front of the iPad all day. They're, so that to me is like one of the most essential parts of education, because there are some kids, in certain parts of the country who may not get to see, different, races of people or different styles of music. That's why it's so easy to make that Disney or Nickelodeon comparison, because that's what those companies, I'm going to say it, I can say it, were once known for. And I think, like you said, sometimes, companies tend to, forget their way. And what you guys are doing is just classic.
Because I've seen that. I went, I left ABC to go work.
I hope I don't get stoned for saying that, Chuck, but that's just the God's honest truth.
I work for a company called Evergreen. Prior to that, I worked for ABC, and what I found was that Cap City's ABC had a much more entrepreneurial culture than ABC did a little bit later, just because they were bigger. But Evergreen had a hugely entrepreneurial culture that slowly ebbed, because the bigger that you got, the more you had to have some sort of controls. And I think, when you talk to people that are at the beginning of Nickelodeon, they just kind of made it up as they went forward, by trying to align their content with what worked. It wasn't like, I remember going to a meeting one time for one of the labels down in Nashville, and they said, okay, you need to have 25 hits this year. So how do you take a business plan and come up with 25 records that work? You don't, right? You put a bunch of records out, and maybe one does, maybe one doesn't.
Cross your fingers and pray for the best.
When you start to do forecasting, it has a tendency to homogenize the product, just out of the necessity of doing forecasting. Because you've got banks to deal with, you've got investors to deal with, and so that's why people tend to, and I say people because they're in charge ultimately, but they tend to gravitate towards things that already work, because there's more responsibility and more downside, not just for them but for the company, if they go out on a limb and fail. Right. Pop rock, right? If Steven Bochco, he never would have gotten another show after that, but he did, because he was Steven Bochco, right? The show was a great concept. It didn't limit him, but if it was anybody else, they wouldn't be allowed to make that mistake. Right.
So how was it having the whole production in the middle, or excuse me, the heart of Times Square? Because that's literally where you were, the heart of Times Square.
I tell you what, it was amazing, because the energy that you feed off of in Times Square, and part of the reason we shot there was because it was still, there weren't shots available for kids. We couldn't go into Baruch because it wasn't open. There was a qualified facility, and we kind of tried something different. And there's the people at the Times Square Alliance were unbelievable. Tom, who runs it, and Damien, who's the point person, couldn't treated us any better. There's a guy named George Stamboli who was like one of the founders of the Times Square Alliance. They said, look, we want to bring kids and families back to Times Square. So they really opened up the red carpet for us, because they took care of the security. I mean, it was amazing. We basically had a full block Duffy Square for a week in Times Square, which, if it was anybody else, that's worth millions of dollars. And it was all in an effort to try to let people know, not only is New York open, but, we want families to come back to Midtown. And we hope to do that again this year coming up, because, with COVID, it's had a really tough effect on Midtown, because that was very business driven, whereas Manhattan has more, there's a lot more mixed use. There's a lot of families that live down there. So, as they helped us, my goal is, what can we do to help them moving forward? Because, Broadway's opening up in a big way this week. There's like 12 new shows.
I know.
Funny Girl to Mr. Saturday Night to Macbeth to,
the world's opening again. Thank goodness.
Yeah. And so we hope to do that again, because we actually had an amazing event. We had the biggest Halloween parade in history in October. And when we say big, we mean it. The parade was literally 10 stories high on the big screens here in Times Square. We had to go virtual, but this year we're hoping that we won't have to, good Lord willing, we're knocking wood. And, we're hoping to create a parade right down Broadway.
That's a wonderful way. Yeah.
And we're doing it on on Halloween Eve, as opposed to Halloween. So nobody has their candy day taken away from.
Oh yeah, because there'd be a lot of upset talent that day. Trust me, not having that candy. Yeah.
And Yeah, you're not gonna
Yeah.
Halloween, right, Dad? Because we want to go church. Oh yeah, okay, fine. Anyway,
So how were the logistics with that as compared to, producing the show?
well, the people at Marriott were wonderful because they became kind of our home base, and so instead of the stage being a stage, the Marriott became our green room. And then we had, tents on, but so, the only thing that would have been bad was weather. And we were so blessed that it didn't rain until we stopped, when we stopped shooting. So
Oh, wow.
the show was in many ways easier to produce, because there's that vibe in Times Square. That's just the only thing that was tough. We really couldn't have a big audience because of the COVID rules.
Which, yeah,
So that was the only thing that was,
which really
lit.
messes things up. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Well, it looked like a absolute success. In fact, I believe that happened that happened right around the time I think that we met on movie reviews and more. Hello, Brian, by the way. Um, um, and I think that was when you first heard my music. I think so. Thank you for
Oh,
for.
I'm not kidding you.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
it is. Well, and the other thing is for this year as we move forward, is we're trying to figure out a way how can we better serve music from all formats. So the more that we expose our audience to, the better. And that's one of the reasons we did jazz for Jazz at Lincoln Center, because for the most part, when you look at school programs, it's usually fairly affluent schools that have music programs. It's not the schools that have less money.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we're all about trying to get the word out to do it, and we air in Chicago, in your hometown. We're on Swag TV.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, you're just telling me now. Shame on you, Chuck.
Well, no, but I mean, it's that, but it's we
I've
love.
been like watching like the stuff on the Wonderama website. You know how hard that is to do that all the time?
No, we don't make anything easy here. No, but the guy that runs Swag TV is just Mr. Sanchez, Joe Sanchez.
I'm familiar with him. Hello.
Yeah, I applaud what he's doing, and we're super excited to have him, as one of our stations. And then the only place that we actually license our content behind a paywall is Black Wall Street, which is actually out of Tulsa. And we have a couple episodes on Amazon Prime, but for the most part, the only place you can get us is on television, and on the Black Wall Street portal, which is a one that you need to pay for. At least that's what they said. So
Yeah, you have to pay
just
for that.
put
Yeah.
our mouth is. So we hopefully are giving programming that resonates with all, but all
Mhm.
can potentially give back. So have I bored your audience to tears for 50?
No, this is what this show is about. This show is about people who are movers and shakers and respected in their field. So anything that we talk about on this show is definitely not boring.
Okay, all right. Well,
Definitely not boring. Hopefully you've enlightened and opened some eyes to some dreamers out there.
yeah. And if any
Yeah.
to we bring in interns uh, all the time. We'll have like 40 working on the show this summer. And if anybody's in the New York area and wants to work on the show, just have them reach out to your, to your podcast and put them in touch with me. And, we'd love to talk to them about potentially working on Wonderama, because we take that For Kids by Kids very seriously, that, people younger than me are going to have a better idea for,
And me.
yeah, but booking, what the right popular culture talent would be. And if you are interested in being on the show, you don't need to be, super famous. You just need to be super, devoted to your craft. And, just send us a sample of what you're doing. And you get booked too. We're doing 26 episodes. So we got lots of room for talent.
Well, there you have it, folks. There you have it. You heard it here, right here on Access Lakeshore Drive. Mr. Chuck Armstrong, the CEO and executive producer of Wonderama, has basically just blown my show up. I'm going to be getting I'm, I'm going to be getting so many emails now. Thanks, Chuck.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Thank you a lot. But my last question that I have for you, which is probably the most important, what would you tell film students, young and old, about perseverance? Because you certainly persevered in this business.
Yeah, I mean, there was something a guy named Bob Johnson told me that I said earlier, which is don't take advice from others when it comes to creative content, because they're always going to give you this stuff that they didn't listen to themselves. There's an old saying, opinions are like certain parts of your anatomy. You have one, but you don't want to hear from it or see it. So the reality is that, you have to have a sense of self, and you have to have a sense of where you fit in. But the things that worked for me was when I went into radio, because, I just loved music. And a lot of Wonderama is about music as well. It was all about, okay, why not me? But I'm low man on the totem pole. I'm willing to learn. I mean, the first week of work in Houston at a radio station, the tire fell off my car. And the wheel literally rolled down the street. And it was going to be $50 to put it back on, which is so inexpensive. But I had to wait a week because I didn't have the money, right?
We've been there. We've all been there.
I was working for free, because I said, hey, I'll work for nothing. It's a commission job. So that also, too, if you're an editor, the thing that I've learned is the best promo editors edit to the audio and have the video fit, right? And so if you're doing a promo, the audio becomes so important. And it's the same thing for a TV show. Great audio can, that's what made Jaws even more impressive, because the shark was, made of rubber. It was the music and the sound effects and the fact that it was, in surround sound before a lot of other movies were. So just pay attention to the craft, because I found that my best editors were never the people that, came from, the big companies. It was an individual that was inspired by the content, and they did a better job because the content spoke to them. So if you're going to do it, just try to do stuff that you care about. And I think you'll actually be better at it. And frankly, if you're an editor, call me. I'm open to, just go to Access Lakeshore. No, but the whole point is the best talent is out there. It's like with music talent. The problem is people just don't get their day in the sun.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just got to work hard. If you put yourself in the right position, you become a student of the business, you're going to be successful. And just remember, this is what I do on my set. They think I'm the craft guy, and because I'll actually bring food to people. And they're like, well,
oh my God, that's horrible.
Not necessarily. I go, we all eat, right? So if you can really always take that, the highest is the lowest, then you'll get people to really hopefully be inspired to help you do what you're going to do as you, try to get your career on path.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard from Mr. Chuck Armstrong. He has 35 Emmy nominations and 7 Emmy Awards. So definitely want to listen to what he has to say. If you guys want to learn more about this beautiful program that we're talking about, Network, you guys can go to WonderamaTV.com with all of the Wonderama fun. Or you guys can actually, you guys are everywhere. They're on Instagram. They're on, I believe they're on TikTok too. They're everywhere. So you guys.
Swag TV in Chicago.
and Swag TV here in Chicago as well. So we just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day.
Well, it's an honor to be on your show, and I can't wait to hear more of your music, man. You're amazing.
Well,
Lakeshore Drive, riding down 79. It's Friday night, all the girls are looking right.
And now the latest release from new Dwarf Planet Records artist, Miss Linda Rocco of Master.
Before I wake, pray the Lord my soul to take. Now I lay me down to sleep, pray the Lord my soul to keep.